is Dr. Robert Aucoin, and I'd like to welcome you to this panel entitled Happiness in the Time of COVID-19. Back in March of 2020, when the pandemic became a reality in Canada, I think we mostly thought this would really just last a few weeks or maybe a month at the most, and that's clearly not the case. And so in this panel discussion, what I want to do is explore some of the personal stories about what living and working online means in the time of COVID-19. In particular, I want to focus on some of the unexpected benefits of being online during the pandemic. I should mention this is one of 3 panels hosted by Shaw Spotlight on this topic. The other 2 panels will focus on teaching online and learning online. In my case, I've been working, teaching, and learning online from home for 25 years and full-time since 2007. So in some ways, for me, the COVID crisis hasn't affected me very much. I must admit, it's been entertaining to observe others discover the benefits of working online and from home that I've really been enjoying for a quarter of a century now. Our goal here today is to capture some of those discoveries and the stories and the lessons learned. Okay, so let's get our panel involved. And what I'd like to do is begin by having each of you introduce yourselves. So your name, what do you do for a living, and maybe what industry or what company, if you feel comfortable revealing that. Could I ask our masked Avenger, Lisa, to start?
Sure. And am I off mute? Yes, I am. Okay. I thought I would start with the mask because people only see my eyes now, and I'm really trying to, have you heard of Schmile? It's like people who have a lot of expression in their eyes, so you have to be smiley now. One of the benefits of COVID. So Lisa Brocken, I live in Mississauga, Ontario, and I am, my whole career I've been in sales and strategic planning really, and sales enablement, if anybody really knows what that is. I have primarily been in the communications and technology field. Recently, I have been in banking, and I am currently self-employed. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for joining us. I appreciate that. Robert, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Robert Wright, and I live and work in Halifax, Nova Scotia, where I'm originally from. And my background is in social work, and these days I manage a small private practice and a small nonprofit counseling agency. And I've been in that field for about 30 years and have had different day jobs in addition to my private practice. But I've been working in private practice and managing this clinic for about the last 11 years.
Thank you. Maynard.
Hi, Robert. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me in the program. My name is Maynard Barrientos, and I live in San Jose, Costa Rica, up in the northeastern mountains of the Central Valley in Costa Rica. Beautiful weather right now, kind of tropical, very rainy. And I've been working for higher education for almost 25 years now. I work for Costa Rica's State University of Distance Education. And this is a public university. It's one of the largest university in Costa Rica. I'm not a teacher, full-time teacher. I'm a full-time researcher, and I coordinate research programs and research groups. And we also coordinate an international research network, Dr. Robert Aucoin is part of. And well, I've been working in education for almost all my life. And since we are a distance education institution, the migration to fully online wasn't that difficult at all. But we had to do many adjustments to be able to move fully online. And we have been fully online and will continue to be fully online until December. since March 6th that the outbreak started in Costa Rica until December, at least in my institution. And obviously, because of our educational system, we have been able to work other institutions to make the transition, and that has been very interesting and very challenging too, to be working with other people in the educational sector in Costa Rica. So very happy to be here and sharing this scenario with you all.
Great, thank you. And of course, I mispronounced your name. I always say Maynard, and he never corrects me. It's Minor. And some of those things that you just mentioned, we're going to come back to, because that sort of transition that you described, I think is really important. So we're going to come back to that. But I want to jump over to Carlos. Carlos, could you introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Carlos Querella, and I live in Toronto. I work in the Royal Conservatory of Music. I am the administrator of Moodle, the LMS, the Learning Management System. I have been doing that here in Toronto since 2016. And the big change that we had was that we used to have like 30% of our students in courses online, and suddenly for the COVID-19 we had to change 100%, so everything is now online. It was a big challenge for us, and I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, that's great. So it sounds like a few of you had experience working online even prior to COVID-19. So what Minor and Carlos have already alluded to that, but Robert, maybe I'll jump to Robert. What was that transition like for you?
Well, because I've done some work online before COVID-19. One of the things I do, for example, is I run a treatment group for male-identified victims of sexual abuse. And it's the only group of its kind in Nova Scotia, probably in Atlantic Canada. And so in an effort to try to make that group accessible to people, we have created an online version of the group. So we were meeting in person on the first and third Wednesdays of the month, and meeting online on the second and fourth. So I've done those sorts of things. I've done some teaching online. I've certainly facilitated training online, and I have done clinical work like that online before COVID. And then, of course, once COVID came, everything just went online.
Mm-hmm. And Lisa, I remember you talked to me a couple of weeks ago about that you were working with a group that was already trying to go online even prior to COVID-19.
Yeah, I mean, really, I've been lucky to work for larger corporations that are already technically set up for working from home remotely. I've probably been working remotely from home for 15 years, off and on. I think one of the things that is interesting is that I always, though, felt like I could get away from my home office. And now, because I can't get away from my home office working online, I'm really need that escape. So I go to a friend's place, her studio, which is still open, and I go there twice a week for 2 or 3 hours to get out of the house. But I'm definitely used to being remote and building those connections through conference calls and email and every other technology that we have.
Yeah, minor, sorry.
It doesn't matter. Well, it's funny because even though we are a state university and a distance education university, we're used to working remotely. We did it from the office. We didn't do it from home. So we had to commute, and we have to face all the problems that commuting and working in an office has for everybody. But it affected us the same. I mean, we had to really move from the remote work from the office to remote work from home. And we had to reduce because our university is a distance education university. It's not really an online university. So we have all kinds of specific academic centers all around the country. We had to travel all around to do work, research work, and all kind of work. And that's been reduced to the minimum also. So the whole logistics have moved to everybody's home. And that has been different. And obviously, we are used to working online, but we were not used to working from home. That's a very important difference.
But what I'd like to follow up with you, Minor, is you do work in education, but your focus is really on the research side. What was that transition like? I'm familiar with some of your research projects, but not all of them. What was that transition like?
Absolutely. I mean, distance education and online education has been our research object, but we worked it on regular basis, like getting in the laboratories and in the office, and so trying to develop research skills, online research skills, and actually doing the research and the coordination and the administration of the research totally online has been a challenge. Although we have to say that because of our international network, we had already started doing some of the projects with international teams. So we had developed some skills, but now we had to develop them fully to the maximum because it's impossible to travel, for example, to other countries to meet with the co-workers, with the other researchers. We have to do everything online.
Mm-hmm. Right. And Carlos, did I hear you say you went from 3% online to 100% online?
30%.
30%. That's still quite a jump. What was that transition?
It was really tough. We had to do a lot of work, and it has to be by a certain date. But now we are 100% online.
Uh-huh.
And something that I was thinking about was that we used to have the concept of a physical office, but now the office is really, you need your hardware and the tools that you need to work.
Yep.
So your laptop and your Zoom and Teams, your LMS,
Uh-huh.
and the people, the students and the teachers and all the users need to be trained to use these tools, and that's another big issue.
Right. I assume, Carlos, that your teachers and your students are all across the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area?
All across Canada and the States.
Oh, wow. Okay. So they're very far flung. But your main offices are in downtown Toronto.
The headquarters, yes, is in downtown Toronto. But there are students that can perform and have exams on different locations around Canada and USA. And we have some students also in Europe, and we are hoping to go to Asia.
Okay, wow. That's really interesting. So it seems like there have been some challenges with the transitions and so on. What sort of positives, if I could go maybe go back to Lisa, what sort of positives have you seen or felt or observed since moving online?
It's interesting because I feel I was working with a team of about 17 people and in groups, but when you're in the office, you don't really ever get together with more than 2 or 3 people at a time. It's more challenging to get people together, to have a meeting in person. And what I found interesting is our group of 17 ended up meeting once a day for 15 minutes in a huddle type. And so we really started to get to know each other, because then some people would, they would stay after the call, and we would have a virtual, just little chat together and get to know each other a little bit more personally, especially because, behind you can see everything that's going on in the house. So that was a really, I think, positive outcome for sure. So a little bit deeper relationships that we wouldn't get if we were just coming in and out of the office.
Right. Robert, what sort of positive outcomes have you seen sort of pause.
I like what Lisa said about, getting to know people a little better because you were essentially meeting with them in their homes.
Mhm.
And of course, because of COVID, you were meeting with people when they were in their homes with their family all around them. So it's not like the kids were at school or at a daycare or something. The kids were in the space. So that was kind of cool. But I think that for me, it's been interesting the amount of time and energy and that it takes to get ready, to get to the office, and to get back from the office. I didn't realize how much energy it took.
Yeah.
And so some people will say that during COVID they've been working longer hours.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that part of that is that your work, what I would say is that, you do a little bit of work, you pop in a load of laundry. You go back to your work, you get your kids lunch. You come back to your work, you put your laundry in the dryer. So that your life and your work can be a little more integrated.
Yep.
It's interesting that during COVID, two things happened in my world. My godfather died, and I ended up moving to be with my godmother. And so I live with my 88-year-old godmother, my 78-year-old mother, and my 17-year-old son. And honestly, I don't know how I would have managed that if it wasn't for COVID.
Mm.
Because I've been working largely from home and have had to train people that when that door is shut, I'm actually working. But I do poke my head out and run down the hallway in between every meeting.
Yeah, I've been running into the same thing because, as I said at the top, I've been working from home full time since 2007. So in some ways, the only thing that has changed for me is there are other people in the house with me now. And at first, I found it really odd because the kitchen is right over there, and I'd be working, and all of a sudden, I'd see someone out of the corner of my eye, and I'm going, "What? What? Like, did someone break into the house? What's going on?" Oh no, it's my daughter, right? But it's been great for us. They've taken on all kinds of other activities. They've been cooking lots of stuff, which works really well for me. So it's been really good. Lisa, you wanted to jump in.
Yeah, I was just going to say, you guys are so lucky that you have an extra space. I don't have an office. I have a condo that has 3 bedrooms, no separate office. So I'm literally in the living room. And if I turn my computer that way, it's my kitchen. So that's been an interesting transition. But I agree with you, Robert. There has been a lot of TikTok videos where the girls are always saying, because I have 2 teens, can we try this? Can we try that? So there's a lot of creativity going on.
Yeah. Carlos, I know you and I had talked a couple of weeks ago and you had some interesting stories.
Yeah, for me it was good. I used to commute to go to downtown. I live in North York. It's like an hour and 20 minutes to go to downtown. So I'm saving now a lot of time. And because now that I used to have lunch outside every day, so now I'm saving money because I'm cooking at home. And also I like that around 12 or 1 at noon, I go for a running.
Oh, good.
That's good. I also don't have to worry too much about what I'm dressing.
Yeah.
I can be having a short and only a shirt for my meetings.
Yeah.
That's good, yeah. And I can spend a lot of time with my wife now.
Yeah.
And that's good. I can talk with my neighbors.
Mm-hmm.
Before I was always in a hurry. Now I have time to talk to them and know them better.
Yeah. The food question is an interesting one too, because it's good, but I have to be careful because, well, you can't see because I'm hiding behind a desk, but things will emerge, right? So we do have to be careful. And I think Maynard, you had mentioned that once before as well, that your dietary habits had changed a little bit.
And for the better, because we cook now, we cook more. Actually, these couple of weeks, we have been concentrating more on vegetables.
Okay.
So it has been very healthy. Actually, I think I have lost some weight in good loss, not bad loss, right? And, but yeah, I mean, food is one issue. And in my case, I live with Adriana, who is my partner. And one of the things that has been very positive is that we had to sit down when the pandemic came to Costa Rica. We have to sit down and decide if we were living in the best place to face it, and to have now that Lisa mentioned that we had this little space here that works as a little space for this kind of work from home. We had to sit down and make a decision, and we realized that we were not living in the correct place. Something you don't think too much about because you're going, living, entering, and you don't spend too much time in the place. So we made the decision, and we were lucky enough to find a better place, and a bigger place, and cheaper place. So that was a very interesting decision, and we always talk about that, and we sit and see the stars and listen to the birds, and then we say, okay, we made a good decision, and it has been good for the relation. Has been good for health. And we have been combining this ambience, this environment, and the cooking.
Yep.
And absolutely, Carlos, I agree with you. I mean, this is the more formal and dressed up I've been in 3 months. And that's something that is interesting, because now I can, since we work with international researchers and teams from all around the world, we have been able to meet easier, taking into account the time differences. It's not a big deal now to meet with people from China, from Spain, from South America, because we're at home. We don't have to go. And if you go to an office, you're limited, right, in a schedule. But from home, you can just wake up, you put the alarm, and wake up at the exact time you need to coordinate a meeting with a person in Japan, in Hong Kong. And it's easier because then you can go back to sleep, right? And so it's easier now to coordinate meetings, international meetings. We live in a better environment that we had really to be conscious about the place we were living in, and we could eat better. And absolutely, we spend more time together, and we understand each other's work better, and we help each other more, because now I see what she's going through, she sees what I'm going through, and we comment, and it's instant. We don't have to wait until getting home to talk about the day. We just report to each other as it goes. So it's been interesting. That communication is better at home, internationally, at work. And yeah, it may be true that you're working more longer hours, but I think it's a better distribution of time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, maybe a little bit more natural. I mean, I think what Robert was saying about how you'll work a bit and then you'll do some personal things a bit. I know, like myself, because I work internationally as well, and I work across many time zones, my day tends to start very early because my early clients are in Africa and they're 7 hours ahead. But by 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, I'm a little tired already. So I'll sometimes go for a walk or go for a bike ride or something like that. If I had to work in a regular office, I don't think I could do that very easily. So there's some built-in flexibility there for sure, definitely. Yeah, that's great. Anything else that you guys were thinking in terms of positives? Maynard, do you want to just continue them?
Yeah, I may say that somehow in your relationship with your coworkers, you eliminate some of that time that is sometimes wasted.
Yeah.
But not only in terms of time, but in terms of energy, like bad attitudes. There's no time for gossiping. There is less time for getting into unnecessary discussions. And so I suddenly see that and actually I meet with my teams. I meet more often now than when we're in the office, because when you're in the office, you spend time like solving problems.
Yeah.
Now we meet to advance in our objectives. And so all this time that is logical in human relationships, it's been reduced to the minimum. And so we use that specific energy, positive energy, to for work and for objectives and for planning. And now I see my coworkers dreaming more and having better and more ambitious goals for work, more imaginative, more creative, and I think that's probably because we spend less time talking about, discussion problems and nocive relationships between one another.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What you're describing, I mean, I'm going to jump to Lisa because she's our management person, but what you're basically describing in management terms is called time on task. I mean, do you find that I don't know, I guess even know how to word it, but that you're spending more time on task? Lisa?
Well, yeah, I'm thinking about that question because I think there was a transition period. So when everything happened at the very beginning, so around the middle of March, and we were all told we had to work from home, we had a mindset that, oh, this is only going to last a couple of weeks, right? It was at the same time that my teens had a March break, and they extended the March break 2 weeks. So it was almost like a mini vacation. It's not that I wasn't working. It was just a little bit of kind of fun. We were all home and the kids were off. And so I was working, and we were really busy because we were also super busy transitioning all of our salespeople off of the floor because there was going to be some closures of some of the stores. So, but I found the longer that we were home, the harder it was for me to concentrate, because then all of a sudden you started thinking, well, how long is this going to? And then you got distracted by the television because, you have the news on in the morning and you're seeing all the numbers rising. And so it was an interesting transition from the beginning. And then it was almost like a little bit of unfocus, and then getting back to focus and saying, okay, this is our new norm. And how do we work, and how do we make sure that we're still being productive, and we're still making sure that our teams are being supported and we're communicating? Because that was one of the biggest things, was communication and being transparent and making sure that they had all the information all the time, so that people didn't start getting worried. But so I'd say that was the transition for me.
Yeah. And probably not everyone likes that transition. Like, I have talked to people who say they really miss the gossiping at work and that sort of stuff. Personally, I've never been that sort of person. I don't work very much face to face. It's mostly teaching. So I go in and I teach my class and I leave. And I prefer it that way. But for everyone's a little bit different. Robert, did I sense that you wanted to jump in here?
Yes. When Miner was talking, he struck something for me, that this idea of that the different social issues at work. And it's really kind of interesting how a lot of employers prior to COVID had this idea that you must work in the office. Mm-hmm. Like, that defines work. People would say, well, can't I work from home one day a week? No. You must work here in this office. You don't start working until you come through the door. You stop working when you leave. And then overnight it was, you must work from home. Yeah. Go home. Don't come here. You must work. And I think what has happened is our lives conformed to the culture of our workplace. And now our work is conforming to the culture of our homes.
Yeah.
So whatever that looks like for you, it is you, right? So if you have a busy household, well, then you integrate your work into your busy household. If you have a quiet household, if you spend a lot of time outdoors, indoors, if you work late at night, if you work, the work is now conforming to your culture. And I think Lisa's right. We did have to get into the mindset of settling into that, because it's kind of like, waiting for a bus. it's harder to wait for a bus if you don't know when it's coming. Right?
Yeah.
And I think it's harder to be in this space when you don't know when it's going to end, and you're anticipating it ending every day. And I just think we just need to relax into this, and we need to just work. We just need to live. We need to accomplish the things we need to accomplish, and hopefully we won't lose the good things that we've discovered during this period of time once COVID lifts, because I think the credibility of employers who believe you cannot work from home has just been devastated. It's just been destroyed, the credibility of those folk. And so I think that workplaces are going to have very different relationships with their employees now.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and it comes down to a question of trust. For me, it's literally been entertaining because for years I've been saying to various clients and employers, you could have, for 25 years I've been saying you could have people working at home. You're a distance ed university. You could have people working at home. Oh no, we can't do that. That's impossible. Blah 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 blah. And you always get that. And I teach for some I won't mention the names, but I teach for some very traditional face-to-face universities. And I say, why don't you offer a couple of online courses? Oh no, we can't do that. Blah, 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 blah. We can't do that. Well, guess what? You're doing it. You've been doing it for 5 months now, and it's working great. So what was all that fuss about for the last 25 years? So, and what I want to say is I told you so, but mostly what I'm doing is just sitting back and laughing. But so it is quite entertaining. Maynard, you had raised something, and I'm not sure how I want to ask this, but you had sort of talked about how you and your partner actually sort of sat down and thought almost strategically about how this was going to work. Can you talk about that a little bit more? I found that very interesting. And then Carlos, I know you and your partner, your wife, did something very similar as well. Maybe you could talk about that later too. But to start, maybe Maynard.
Yeah, and maybe to continue with the line of beautiful thought that Robert has. He has put it exactly the right way. I mean, how much having this separation between life and work was functional and as an excuse to keep them separated, and then concentrating on work as an excuse to not being responsible for living, right? And I think Robert's commentary has to do with this. I mean, how much work was an excuse also for people to avoid living. And that's impossible right now because work is being integrated into your living thing. And relationships are also in that line of thought. I think that it was very nicely cut. I mean, this is the discussion about home. This is a discussion about work, your work, my work. They don't connect. But suddenly everything has to connect, and then you have to make decisions about your work, your professional life, your partner's work and professional life, and the living together. Because everything is happening at the same time in the same space, right? And so you have to sit down and talk about those things. I mean, it's not that children are ones of the responsibility of only one of the couple, right? Now we've seen it. I mean, how a women's situation at work and at home and this extra work they always have. Everything has been exposed in its cruelty, right? And suddenly there's no excuse. There's no further excuse to not sit down and, okay, wait a second. I mean, I'm not the one in charge of the children all the time now, because everything is happening at the same time in the same space. And suddenly, I mean, this integration of things that you are trained to see separately, right? Not anymore. And that means also your relationship with your clients, your students, your coworkers, and sometimes you now have to understand the other person's context to a level that's never seen before. I mean, because the artificial context of work, of the office, is all set up, right? specific times for coffee, for lunch, for living, for commuting. But at home, sometimes you don't have lunch because you forgot, simply because you forgot. And what about who's cooking today, or who's in charge of? Because my schedule you have to be more understanding. You have to really learn how to read and how to interact in the other person's context, because it's your own. And then you have to integrate in your living environment your clients, your customers, your coworkers, your students, your boss. And sometimes your boss becomes another person, another real person in a specific context, with wives, with children, with dogs, with conditions. And that's a total change in the way you relate to people.
Yeah. And it seems to me, and correct me if I'm wrong, it seems to me people have been really open about responding to those sorts of things that you've just described. I don't know if you can hear it or not, but there's two teenage girls on the other side of my door here who are cooking and slamming pots around, even though I ask them not to. But that happens all the time, and no one really seems to complain. And people just go, well, you have to live, right? This is your home, and you have to live. And yes, you're working in your home, but you have to live too. And I've been really, really heartened. I can't think of any other better word than that. I've been heartened to see how open and gentle people have been about that. It's like, yeah, okay, I can hear pots crashing in Robert's kitchen, but so what? We move on. It doesn't matter. Carlos, did you want to jump in there? You'll have to unmute.
Yes, at some point I was concerned about the social interaction. So, but people, they are always creative. So for example, in my office, we are having every Thursday, at the end of the day, the beer day. So everybody connects in Zoom and have a beer, or with my family. My kids, they do not live with us. My daughter, she lives in Aucoin, and my son, he's in Victoria. So we connect with their friends or our friends through Zoom and celebrate birthdays, a happy birthday. It's interesting how creative people are during these times to continue to be together and maintain relations.
Yeah, no, that's great. Robert, I saw you wanted to jump in.
No, I just wanted to say that, and I think that part of what we've been doing is, because this transition is happening in the context of global pandemic, I think people have been motivated to be very compassionate to each other.
That's a good word. Yeah,
and I think that, I was on a Zoom meeting today, and someone had to look up to say goodbye to their husband who was leaving, and then their dog was whining because the husband was leaving the house at a strange time, and so she was comforting the dog, and it was just a very human thing that was happening, and I just it was a warming sort of thing, but I also wanted to say, just in terms of the social activity, so I have this network of friends, and sometimes occasionally we'd get together and we'd play cards. That's a particular game we used to play, and we were mourning being able to do that during COVID. But we learned that we found this kind of card center online, so you can play cards with your friends online. And so we split our screen, and we have Zoom on the one side so that we can all see each other, and we can trash talk and all of that. And then on the other side, we have the game so that we can play cards online with each other. And it's interesting because I've done that now with people that I've never played cards with in person.
Right.
Because we just call a game together and say, well, if we couldn't get our fourth, we just ask someone to be our fourth who could just join us from home. They didn't have to leave their home. They didn't have to go to a strange house. They didn't have to navigate all that. And so we've really been having a good time. And we only learned to do that because of COVID.
Yeah, and that new person might not even be in Halifax.
Exactly.
Yeah. Lisa.
Well, it's just interesting what you're talking about, the social aspects, because one of the other things I found very interesting is with my teens. So I think a lot of us assume that because they are very social media savvy, and I don't know about you guys, but my teens don't get together, it doesn't seem to me, as much as I did when I was their age. So we would go out and we would just hang out, right? What I've seen though, is in fact they are very social. But it's all through technology, and it's amazing because I really didn't understand until this hit how social they are. They're actually even, I think, probably more socially connected than I was as a kid. And one of the funniest things that happened was, so, we have business Zoom meetings, and they start at a certain time and then they end at a certain time, and it's cut and dry. Well, they have Zoom meetings, which is really funny. And depending on the number of kids that come in, so there was one that I think she had probably like 10 friends that came on. If it's a large group of people, you can just ghost. You could just leave and not say anything. I said, you just left that and didn't say anything. Oh, they won't notice. But if it's like 3 people, you can't do that. So right. It's been really awesome, really understanding their culture. I've never seen that before.
Yeah, I've seen my daughter do something similar. They'll set up, they don't actually use Zoom. I actually don't know what they use, but they'll set up those meetings. And she had one today, but she's got an online violin lesson that starts at 4:15, and I kind of poke my head in sometimes to make sure she's doing what she's supposed to do. And she didn't let go of the call that she had with her friends. She just left it running and then did her violin lesson. And so I asked her about it, and I said, so you forced your friends to listen to your violin lesson? And she said the same thing that you just said. They don't care. They're doing other things. So what? And so that kind of fluid motion. You're right. I mean, Lisa, we're a similar age, and you're right. When we were younger, the social networks that we were part of were way more rigid than I think they are now. Yeah, so that's really interesting. So I think we have a lot to learn from those people. In fact, that's kind of a nice segue to a question I wanted to ask all of you as well, which is, do you have any sort of tips? I mean, we've already talked about quite a few, but any tips for people, because there are some people who are struggling, and I think we all know people who are struggling with online working. Do you have any tips or suggestions or strategies for them? Carlos, could you start maybe? Could you start us off?
Yeah, well, my wife, she works in a restaurant. Mm-hmm. She's not big savvy. So and sometimes because I work with computers, I think, she must know that, or she must, and things are not like that. So you have to be patient, have your equipment ready, and be calm. Everything will be okay. You just need to have that time to learn the passions. Mm-hmm. As long as you have a connection to internet and your computer, you're going to be okay.
Right. Yeah, that's a really good message. And I've been trying to say that to everybody as well. Like, yes, it's going to be frustrating, but you have to trust me. It's going to be okay. We're going to be all right. That's a great tip. Maynard, is there something you'd like to suggest?
Yeah, it's difficult because you have to suppose that everybody can do it. Like, and it's not always the case. People are struggling too. There's inequality in our social in our society, but patience has to be one, right? I mean, because it's an adaptation, and it's not only an adaptation in terms of technology, but in terms of human relationships, as we have seen. Patience is one. You have to relearn how to learn.
Yeah. And
you have to trust people who can teach you how to survive in these kind of new conditions. But probably the most important thing is that you have to be more careful with your digital identity and and you have to learn how to, it's not the same subject, the same kind of subjectivity, the ones that goes every day to work, to the one that is always trying to do it from home through a computer or through social media, right? There are different rules, and you have to learn those rules, and you have to be as you are very careful when you go out and you get dressed and try to have the correct amount of money to go and come back, etc. You have to take care of your digital identity, and it's not always something that is being talked about and taught at school or in your group. So what if, because you have to integrate now, you have to integrate your Facebook, your WhatsApp, your personal life, your working life, and you have to be very organized. It's a different kind of organization, different kind of subjectivity that you have to project and take care of. And so being careful with your digital identity, what you say, how you say it, where you say it, through what media you say it, you have to be very careful. It's not, because at work you can just have a private meeting or so, but what about what comes in the internet stays there forever and can play against you. So you have to be very careful with your digital identity, digital citizenship, right?
Yeah, that's something I really worry about. I mean, Lisa and I were talking about, because we have teenage kids, you know, some of the special challenges around that. Actually, Robert has a teenage kid too. And that is one thing I do worry about with kids, is that they don't understand about digital identity and that the internet is permanent. And so I spend a lot of time with my kids talking about those sorts of things. But absolutely, that's a really, really good tip. Robert, what are your sort of number one or two tips?
Well, I think of, because I'm a mental health professional, I think about people's mental health. And one of the things I say to people is that during the pandemic, you really have to balance your physical health with your mental health.
Yep.
Because, and so if you are struggling to the point of things being dangerous for you, then you need to kind of be wise and bend your COVID bubble so that you can function. So for example, maybe what you need is a work buddy. Extend your bubble to include the household of your work buddy, and then you can go work from home at the home of your work buddy.
Yeah.
So you can take your tablet, your laptop, go to your friend's house, and at opposite ends of the kitchen table, you can be at work, working remotely with your buddy, so that you can take your coffee breaks together, you can eat your lunch together, you can do something. Just because we're in this COVID zone, we're trying to minimize the contacts, you know, to keep the spread of the disease from, you know, but we're not trying to eliminate the contacts, right? So working with your work buddy at their place or at your place and having that kind of COVID bubble is better than going to the office where there are 120 people. But if you can't be socially isolated for extended periods of time, because maybe you live alone, you don't have children, you don't have a partner, that sort of thing, you can increase your bubble to include people that you work with like that.
Yeah.
So I think that people need to think about what it is that they need in order to be well, and then think about how they can do that safely. And I think that's really critical. And if you don't know how to do that safely, there are public health officials you can consult with who can help you figure out how to be emotionally well while at the same time being responsible with respect to social distancing and COVID protocols.
Yeah. My worry is that people will start to go down the rabbit hole and not realize that there's a problem until it's too late. I spend a lot of time consulting with organizations, mostly colleges and universities, on how to get online. And within the first hour of me doing workshops with them, I jump into a section I call About You. And it's basically make sure that you're physically healthy and mentally healthy. And even online, when I'm doing a session like this, I can see their eyes just open. They go, oh yeah, I'm kind of important in this equation too. And I'm going, yes, you are. You're very important in this equation. So, and it's a nice jumping off point for the rest of our conversation, which usually takes about a week. So it's really nice. Lisa, I saw you wanted to jump in there.
Yeah, I really resonated with what Robert was saying in terms of that social bubble. For me, it's not with work people, it's with my close friends. So I have a network of 3 very good, very close friends. And we've made sure that we understand where everybody is. And so if once we opened up and we're able to start to get together with each other, we're physically getting together with each other. So that's something that I would recommend as well, is checking in with the people in your life, because it's so easy right now to social isolate. Like I even find myself sometimes, I'll go days in the house here and, my girls are doing their own thing. And then it's like, oh shoot, I haven't talked to anybody. And, you start to feel emotionally drained because of it. And so, 3 times a week, I get up and I go to my girlfriend's place at 7:00 and we go for an hour and a half walk before we both have to start working. Another friend I mentioned earlier on, I go to her studio. It might have been before this actually, but I go to her studio twice a week because she still has a studio that's open, and I isolate myself in one of her rooms, but we have a coffee together. And then my third friend, she lives alone, and I also go over to her place and we just have a visit once a week or so in the backyard. And so it's really important, really important to keep the connection with at least one person in your life.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, you have to look after yourself and look after each other as well, right? Yeah, I think that's so important. What about for your employers or employees, if you have people working for you? Is there anything that, say, your employer could do to make your online working experience better? How could they improve life for you? Lisa.
Mm-hmm. Definitely the right technology, because sometimes technology can be very frustrating. I think once we get into stage 3, if offices are going to be opening, to have offices more like a shared space. Obviously, we want to be careful about what I'm saying about shared space, but meaning a space where you can go in and have that connection with people at work, maybe have those face-to-face meetings that you need to, but still be able to primarily work remotely and be at home. So it's not like everybody has a desk and you're going in and you're working 9 to 5. It's more of a fluid work environment and providing something for people to get together, but really enabling them to work from home primarily.
Mm-hmm. Minor, I'm curious to know what you have to say about this, because you actually work at a distance ed university, but normally you're working in a face-to-face environment. So what could your employer do to make your life better?
Yeah, distance education in higher education, which is a special kind of organization too. I mean, in higher education, we expect to interact more multidisciplinarity, right? And but I would say keep erasing the frontiers, keep erasing those sharp limits, right? That sometimes avoid contact between different spheres of work and different, like our students are now more integrated to our organizational logic than before. And that's very important. We even care about them more. I mean, we even keep track of how many of them have gotten COVID-19.
Oh.
And something that is with other diseases, you don't care if the person has the flu, or, right? But if they have been infected with COVID-19, we are concerned about that because we need to give extra services to them, etc. Same with employees, and in case of the now I already was working in a very horizontal kind of working environment, but still, I mean, there are limits, the frontiers that we have to keep erasing, and to somehow have, as Lisa is somehow suggesting, a more integrated working or living spaces, even if we have to go back, right? But I don't think we're going back to that kind of very structurally limited kind of bordered like spaces, right? I think it's going to be totally different, and hopefully it's going to stay like that.
Yeah. Carlos, what? Because you work for a very, in some ways, traditional and in some ways non-traditional employer.
Yes, but because I work in the digital learning department, we can work from home, but something that is different from working on a physical location is that in my office I can have like 2 monitors, or I can have a good chair, all that kind of stuff I have to buy.
Yeah.
So I need like 2 monitors at home. My chair was not good, so I bought a gaming chair.
Mm-hmm.
And then you have to prepare to have a good internet connection and things like that. And the employers need to know that we need those kind of tools.
Yeah, and I think that's going to be a big issue because and I'm going to get to that. That's kind of our next question. But some employers are going to not want to pay for those sorts of things, and maybe we need to negotiate a little bit, right? And say, maybe the employers will pay for part of it, and we'll pay for half of it, in light of the fact that you're no longer paying for parking in downtown Toronto and that sort of stuff. So I'd like to come back to that because I want to jump over to Robert. I mean, Robert and I, in some ways, are in a strange position because we don't have normal jobs. But from your clients, Robert, is there one thing you'd like to say to clients about the whole online working experience that would make it better for you?
Well, that's a good question. Let me just say something about the employers, right, and their investment in their employees. When I used to direct head of staff of about 35 people, when a new person used to join me, I used to say, look, get an ergonomic assessment of your workspace, and here's a voucher to go buy the technology that you need to work safely. Mm-hmm. Because I wasn't fooled by the idea that investment would pay dividends. Not only because it would keep my employees physically safe and on task and on the job and allow them to work with, but the gesture is worth the couple of $100 that it cost me.
Yeah.
And I think that's one of the things I think we need to realize is that we need to help people to be able to function in this environment. And so we work a lot in our clinic with people who are marginalized folk, right? And so some folk have struggled with having the technology to be able to access our services. And so we've really had to encourage people to look, identify the need for a cell phone as a health requirement. Mm-hmm. Get your doctor to sign a voucher and go to the state and say, in the era of COVID, if I don't have a cell phone, I don't have access to my doctor. I don't have access to my therapist. I don't have access to my psychiatrist. We really need to advocate for each other to be able to have the technology so that no one is left out of this. Nobody's left out of this environment. And it's really challenging because, of course, during COVID, libraries are shut down.
Yeah.
So the people who used to access their libraries to use the technology to access the things that other folk access digitally. They haven't had that opportunity. So we've really had to encourage people to self-advocate, and we've had to advocate for them to get the technologies that they need to be engaged. But then the other thing, of course, we say to people is, stay in touch with us by whatever means necessary. Right? Call us on a payphone, call us from a friend's house, use a crappy cell phone. It doesn't matter. Just don't stress over not having the best technology.
Uh-huh.
Just get online, just get connected, and it'll be okay. And as people have challenged themselves to do that, if they've been self-advocating for the technology, as they've been risking to put themselves out there, most people have been quite positive, like quite happily surprised by how functional this has been.
Yeah, it's interesting because I've been hearing this from colleagues who are getting Zoom tired. I don't know what the expression is. And they're saying that sometimes now, if they don't need the video, they just pick up the phone and call somebody. And they find that it's less tiring, less stressful. They don't have to worry about their hair and makeup and glasses and all that sort of stuff. And so they're doing more we used to call it POTS, plain old telephone system, right? So more and more people are starting to realize you don't have to do this super high tech anymore. If I could stick with you, Robert, just for a minute, and I'll come back to everyone else. Someday, hopefully soon, COVID-19 will be over. We'll have a vaccine, or more like that's the most likely scenario. I guess herd immunity is possible. What would you like to see in terms of work in a post-COVID-19 world?
Well, I mentioned that I've been managing the health of my elders here in the household. So for the first time ever in the history of mankind in Nova Scotia, you've been able to actually talk to your doctor on the phone. Mm-hmm. And your doctor's been able to get paid for that.
Yeah, it's the same in Ontario.
Right? I mean, it's so ridiculous that it took a global pandemic for us to realize that an elderly individual with significant mobility issues could probably benefit from touching base with their doctor by the phone, as opposed to trying to get dressed and moving and all of that. So I hope that those sorts of things that have really enabled greater accessibility don't disappear. I have dear friends who have anxiety disorders or who are on the autism spectrum, and they've been saying things like, finally, the world is accommodating me. Well, I would hope that when post-COVID, there's still an on-ramp for those folks to be as engaged and and to have as much accessibility to the world as they have experienced during this period of time. And I think that we need to then look at ways that we can integrate in-person and online service delivery so that we have a truly more accessible world post-COVID.
Yeah, that's great. Maynard, what would you like to see post-COVID-19?
No more excuses. I mean, I think the mythology that we inherited from previous centuries in terms of the mythology of work holds no more. I mean, it has been uncovered, and it's a mythology, and it's mythological. I mean, there are all kinds of things that we took for granted that the innocence has been lost. I mean, we won't believe them anymore. I mean, accessibility is one thing, but the other thing is this mythology has worked as a delay of conscious delay of the investment that we have to make as a society to make it more accessible for everyone. And I think there's no more excuses. I mean, I don't want to keep listening to excuses not to make this investment in technology, this investment in the access to internet for everybody, the access to health, mental health, etc. I mean, there's no way that we can go back to a world in which people are going to tell us that something is impossible because there has to be done this way and that way, because that's the only way we have to think about it. There's no more excuse to not being more creative, more innovative. And I think that all members of our society in our country, we have lost our innocence. The bind has fallen, and we won't believe any more of that stuff, mythological stuff, all those stories that we have inherited, that the world is like that, and that it's impossible for us to believe and think and work in a different way. So I think that that's something I don't want to go back to. Even if I have to go back to the office, I don't want to go back to the old mythology of work.
Right. Yeah. Well, and not to put too much pressure on you, but I mean, that sounds like an amazing research project, and you are the director of a research center. Not putting any pressure on you, but
Good thing you're part of our research network, so you're invited also.
Yeah, I had actually said to my wife the other day that there's probably a PhD thesis in here, and she looked at me and she said, "You're not doing another PhD. It's not happening." No. So anyway, Carlos, what would you like to see?
Well, I would love to continue working online.
Mm-hmm.
This will mean that I can work from any place in the world as long as I have a connection to the internet and a good laptop. I will be happy to do that. And this COVID-19 had demonstrated that, so we don't have to be on a physical office.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree completely. Yeah, that's fantastic. Lisa.
I think I wanted to pick up something that Robert said in terms of accommodation, because there's been a lot of convenience, I think, that have come out of this, right? The grocery stores have, personal shoppers have, increased considerably, and they've made sure that they're accommodating people who can't do their own grocery shopping or are disadvantaged in some way. So I hope that trend continues, the accommodation piece. What I also hope continues in terms of a trend is the reduction of consumerism, I think. And because I know personally, I have saved a ton of money and didn't really pay attention to, my spending habits. And now, because I have no place to spend my money because I'm staying out of retail and it's been closed for so long, it's like, oh, I can actually live off that. Okay. It's been pretty amazing, actually. So I hope that stays, not just with everybody, but with me as well. That we don't need all of those things. We can get back to the basics, enjoy our families, enjoy nature, enjoy, making a meal together. Minor, you said that you're making way more meals, feeling healthier. So I hope those real positive things stay with us.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I agree with all of those points. And I've been sort of saying the same thing, that, I hope we can do more, not necessarily 100%, but more online and spend less time in our cars commuting to and from work and looking for parking spaces. And I travel, even though I work from home, I travel a lot for work internationally. And for the most part, I like it. But boy, there are times I come back from long trips and people go, "Oh, that must have been a fantastic trip. You must have seen so many things." And I go, all I remember is being in an office all day. And so that's not good. That's not healthy. And so I think we certainly need to get past that, I think. I want to just open it up for as long as you want as a group, but are there any final thoughts you have, or not concerns, but questions or things that you'd like to add that we didn't cover?
Well, yeah, I have to say, going back to Robert's idea of mental health,
Mm-hmm.
for our culture, it has been really difficult not to be able to touch and kiss, and because
Yes.
our social distance is not that much like in other cultures, right? So that's one concern. How can we, talking about mental health, how can we keep ourselves mentally healthy if we need this body touch, body proximity, right? That is so integrated in our culture, and Robert, you have experienced it for the time you've been here, and that we don't ask, we just go and hug and touch and kiss everybody. So how can we keep the bubble and extend the bubble so we can somehow psychologically replace that body proximity by other possible techniques? And that's something that we have to be, at least in Costa Rica and Latin America, probably Carlos understands this better. How can we go back to this kind of need for social proximity, right, in terms of body sensations and physical contact that we need? But we'll have to work on that. But I think that there are more opportunities than to reinvent ourselves in our social interactions now, and the people, as you have been saying, are more open towards that, toward diversity and accepting this diversity, being more sympathetic, more compassionate, more social, more community type, right, than individualistic or concerned about my own problems, my own commuting, my own economical distress, etc. I mean, and even though we need to somehow, at least in Costa Rica and Latin America, we need more body contact, I think we are more open to the other people, other person's kind of context and problems and mental disposition, now that we have been confronted by this necessity of social distancing.
Yeah, no, I think that's really powerful. And you said two words there that I really liked. One was to reinvent ourselves. And I think, reinvent ourselves in all ways, like personally, professionally, socially, and so on. And then the other word that you said that I really liked is to be open. And I worry in the past that as societies, we haven't been open to those sorts of changes, but maybe I'm overly optimistic, but I really think I'm seeing more openness now since COVID-19. And in fact, that was one of the motivations for me wanting to do this panel. So that for me, that's very exciting, is to see that sort of openness to thinking about reinventing ourselves. So I think that's really exciting. Does anyone else have any sort of, Lisa, you want to add something?
Yeah, I just, I think one of the places where I don't have the answer is, we've talked a lot here about post-secondary education, like more adult education, right? Older people. But I've seen the impact of what this has had on our education system for elementary schools, junior highs, middle schools, high schools. And I'm really hoping that this is a catalyst for some significant change in our education system. Yeah. I mean, I think some of it is. I've heard some of the discussions, and I've read about, the actions that they may take coming in September to get the kids back in school. And it's exactly what I think the education system needs: smaller classrooms, a blend of online classes and in-school classes, making sure, because the kids, they still need that, I think, physical social interaction. It can't be all online, but, I'm sure that there are other improvements that will come out of this. And so I'm really looking forward to that.
Yeah, me too. I mean, again, for 25 years, myself and my colleagues have been advocating exactly these sorts of things in all levels of education. And we've always been told, no, you can't do that. No, you can't do that. Well, why can't you do that? Well, it won't work. Online learning doesn't work. I've heard all the excuses. And now I'm kind of going, well, guess what? We're doing it and it's working. And so and then it goes back to what Maynard was saying. If we can be open to reinventing ourselves and reinventing our systems, then it'll work. It'll work because we want it to work, right? So yeah. Robert, did you want to add something?
Well, I guess I'm thinking on a big picture level. It seems to me like, even though there's been fits and starts and there have been some glitches, it seems to me like we have globally responded to this pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
And business as usual has been suspended while we looked after each other.
Yeah.
Right? The truth is that we are all living on this planet together, and that if one person is sick, we all can suffer from that illness. And that's quite literal.
Yeah.
But I think it's a metaphor that I think we should hold on to. And one of the things that I've seen is that working with people who are really poor is that we recognize that during a pandemic in Canada, the poorest people should not be expected to live off of what we expect them to live off of in usual times. And so their benefits for disadvantaged people have actually increased during this period of time.
Mm-hmm.
Why should that change?
Yeah.
Why, when the COVID passes, should we say, okay, now that we're not in danger of getting infected, you can go back to struggling like you did before the pandemic, trying to figure out where your next meal is coming from. Is there some way that we could kind of keep that kinder, gentler disposition to each other?
Yeah.
In COVID, like less consumerism, less concerned about the almighty dollar, more concerned about the environment, more concerned about our collective public health, more concerned about how we are so interconnected that we need to be looking after each other. A country ships medical supplies to another country because they realize if you get sick, I'm going to get sick. So, could we keep a little bit of that positivity in global thinking?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think it's a fantastic idea. I mean, I always explain this to my students. So if I meet somebody on the street in Canada, especially if I'm speaking in English, and I say, I say, "Hi, Robert, how are you doing?" And you'll say, "Oh, I'm fine." And that's our greeting. In a lot of the African countries that I work in, like Zimbabwe and Zambia, if you translate their greetings literally, it is, "Hi, how are you doing?" And the response is, "I am well if you are well." And I love that. And I just think that's where we need to be going. And I've seen that in COVID-19. I've seen it for the first time in my life. I've seen it. So it's really just amazing. Yeah, that's great. So I think we'll wrap it up because I've really used a lot of your time, and I want to be respectful of that. But I really appreciate the time that you've given. This has been fantastic. It's been such a great experience for me. I really want to thank you so much for your time and all the wonderful insights that you've provided today. And as I said at the top, I've been working in this industry for really more than 25 years, more years than I'd care to admit. And I thought that I had heard all the stories. I thought I had heard it all about living and working online, but I really learned a lot today, and I really appreciate it. So Lisa, Carlos, Maynard, Robert, thank you so much for your time and all the stories, and I wish you all the best in the time of COVID-19. Thank you very much.